Welcome to the BCEN and Friends podcast, where we hold interesting conversations about learning with a range of thought leaders, BCEN certification holders, and industry professionals. Our goal is to create value and insight for you, our professional nurses across the emergency spectrum. We hope you find our discussions interesting, informative, sometimes funny, sometimes serious, and always worth your time.
In this podcast episode, we want to introduce you to our BCEN friend, Erin Montgomery. Erin's nursing background and roles within transport fueled a passion to advocate and educate for advancing pediatric emergency care. From leading mobile simulation training across Indiana to managing the National Impacts Collaborative, Erin is shaping the future of pediatric acute care. This episode is called The Little Things That Sneak Up on You.
I'm Holly Briggs, a professional development specialist at BCEN and one of your hosts for today. I'm joined by my co-host, Michael Dexter, Director of Professional Development at BCEN. Hi, Michael.
Hey, Holly. Great to be with you.
That's great to have you. In this episode, we're joined by Erin Montgomery. Erin is a dedicated pediatric critical care nurse with extensive experience in both bedside care and critical care transport. She is a great resource for all things pediatric and beyond. Michael, could you please introduce us to our BCEN friend, Erin?
Yeah, Holly, absolutely. I'm really excited to speak with Erin today. Erin is currently serving as a transport nurse for Riley Hospital of Children for the Pediatric Neonatal Specialty Team in Indianapolis. Erin is passionate about improving pediatric emergency care through education and outreach, and has played a key role in establishing the Pediatric Community Outreach Mobile Education Program, bringing high-fidelity simulation training to community hospitals across Indiana. It's through this work that Erin has now become the program manager for the National Impacts Collaborative, where she continues to enhance pediatric acute care through innovative simulation-based education. Erin, welcome to the BCN Friends podcast. It's a pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you, Michael. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you guys for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. I got to meet you not too long ago and just very impressed with all of the work that you're doing, and we'll jump into that in a little bit. But before we do, can you just let us know a little bit about why you became a nurse to begin with and how your journey led you to where you are today and how you got so involved in pediatrics?
Sure. Yeah. So I think I always had an interest in the medical field as like a teenager. You're trying to figure out what you're going to do with your life. I kind of wavered between that and potentially becoming a school teacher. So there was always an underlying theme of liking to work with children. And this is probably going to date me, but I used to watch the show ER with my mom every Thursday night and definitely really enjoyed that. And I would say that had some influence on me. And then I knew I did not want to spend years and years in medical school. So I kind of chose nursing, and I'm very glad I did, very happy with my career. And then throughout nursing school, I think I always knew I wanted to do something with kids. I actually thought I wanted to do NICU until I did my NICU clinicals. And then I decided I don't think this is for me. And I started working as a student nurse extern is what we called them. I don't know if a lot of other programs called them that, but you got called a SNE, student nurse extern. And I started working in the Peds ICU as a student nurse. And I just immediately knew like, this was it. This was what I wanted to do. I had some amazing mentors, but seeing that patient population and getting to work in the PICU that early on really kind of solidified it for me. And so that's how I ended up in the PICU. And then as I kind of progressed through my career, I transitioned to becoming a transport nurse. And that's really kind of led me into the work that I've been doing over the last 10 years or so. My job working as a transport nurse here in Indiana.
And so through that work, we've mentioned Impacts Collaborative, but when you look up Impacts Collaborative and see who's involved, it's a lot of doctors. So how did you get involved in that work, from going from pediatric transport to working with this group?
Yeah, that is a great question. I have been the token nurse in that group for a while. I started by becoming involved in education and outreach locally here in Indiana. We have a very robust neonatal outreach team, and they had reached out to our transport team to see if someone was interested in coming along to community hospitals, specifically their labor and delivery departments, to kind of talk about the process of transporting a patient and what happens, and sometimes why we do the things we do when we get there. So it was really kind of help fostering these relationships with these hospitals. And I went and I saw that and I thought, this is amazing. Why are we not doing it for pediatrics? There are only 2 children's hospitals in the state of Indiana. So the majority of the hospitals here are going to be community sites that typically do not have pediatric specialties. And so I worked with some of the intensivists at Riley to create, like you mentioned in the intro, Michael, the Pediatric Community Outreach Mobile Education Team, where we were working with community EDs, initially just doing high fidelity simulations. So we were taking these really fancy high-tech simulators, running through pediatric scenarios, so that high acuity, low volume, to allow the teams to practice together, hopefully learn something about pediatric care. And what we kind of realized as we did that was that is just one small portion of this. There is the whole other portion of, do you have the equipment and medications to take care of children? Do you know where it is? Do you have policies and procedures? And so we realized we were missing a pretty key part in helping some of these EDs feel a little bit less nervous to take care of children. And that's when we came across the National Pediatric Readiness Project and the Impacts Collaborative, which is a national collaborative of children's hospitals and academic medical centers that has done outreach and education with community emergency departments. So that was kind of my introduction to that work and that team. And then it just really kind of all clicked that simulation really went hand in hand with this National Pediatric Readiness Project of making sure that EDs have everything they need to feel prepared to care for children. And so, we can't just focus on one part of it. And I think people love the Sims, which is great, but, we didn't want to forget about all of these other aspects of it. So that was kind of my introduction. And I think I brought a different perspective because, Michael, like you mentioned, it was mostly all physicians in that group. And so I think just even some of the baseline things of education about push-pull or pediatric IV starts, which they know that's a need, but how do we address it? And then some of the things that we see in turnover in nurses, onboarding nurses, for like new hire orientation, we're able to incorporate a lot of things to be able to target that population a lot more, because we all know there's a lot more nurses out there working than physicians in the ED. So that was how I started work with that group, and it's really evolved over these last 8 to 10 years.
Wow, Erin, we could spend time and like dive into. There were 3 specific things that you said that I was like, "Ooh, we should talk more about that. We should talk more about that. We should definitely talk more about that." So I feel like we may have to go off grid on a few of these questions simply because there's several things that you said throughout this that I'm like, we need to spend some more time. So we will. We're gonna have to hit some of those topics. I think we could spend a ton of time to the perspective that a nurse brings to any type of project that is in healthcare in general. We could probably do a whole podcast just on that. But the idea is that when you were talking about your career and getting into transport and pediatric intensive care, that kind of thing, I feel like the flight and transport nurses I know, they have such a passion for education. And I think it comes from the fact that they're not just in like one facility where you kind of your orientation is very much to the education of your facility, and that's as it should be, right? Like the supplies you have, the things that you do. But I feel like because they end up going to all these different facilities and working with a ton of different providers and nurses, and their ability to adapt and be flexible and to have to learn a lot and be educated on a lot, there's something about that type of mindset, I think, that really does lend to the ability to take in a lot of information, take in a lot of knowledge, and disseminate that well. So I feel like there's just the people I know in transport, they're just really great at educating, and they have a passion for it, which again, is awesome because most transport companies do have some type of like arm of their company that's really forward to like community outreach, whether that be to hospitals, whether that be, in collaboration with EMS services or fire services, et cetera, like really trying to target things in the community. So I wanted to kind of step back to that and just say like, is there something that you've seen from your flight transport that really you felt like we identified this in our community and this was a really big need and kind of how that made the greatest impact? And again, I know you kind of talked about how you got involved with impacts, but was there something, or maybe even speak more to that? So I'll leave the question out there for you.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great question, Holly. And when I transitioned from working as a nurse in the PICU at a large children's hospital, full transparency, we got a lot of transfers. We got a lot of direct admits from community EDs. And I am not proud to say now that then there was a lot of Monday morning quarterbacking of, I can't believe they did this, or why would they do this? Or, oh, great, we got another train wreck from hospital X. Definitely, not the most collaborative of thoughts, but moving to transport, and like you mentioned, being out across all different types of hospitals in the state, to large resource academic centers, to very small critical access hospitals, was a huge eye-opener for me. I think helped with my compassion. I've always had a passion for education, but like you mentioned, this just really fueled that, to where I was like, oh, Erin, you're kind of a jerk. Everybody is doing the best that they can, and everybody wants to take the best care they can of their patients. Like, nobody is coming into this with malice or malintent. Like, they just literally are doing what they can with what they have. And that was a huge learning curve for me, even working on transport. I was used to having all the help, and now I just have one other person. So I think that contributed a lot to where I am today, of seeing, okay, so instead of being a part of the problem and being the person that complains, what can I do to help? And through transport, and particularly the team I worked for, which is a large health system, a lot of it was focused on, like what you were saying, working with fire departments and EMS agencies to do things like on the scene training. Very important. Do not want to take away from that. We do have a little race here in May with some race cars called the Indianapolis 500 that we partner with, and doing a lot of stuff for that. It's super fun. Again, don't want to take away from that. We have a helicopter there every year at the race. It's definitely needed just in case. But I felt like there was a huge population and learner base that we were missing. And that was nurses, physicians, APPs, respiratory and community emergency departments that are going to see children, that we're not providing them education and resources so that they can feel like they are most prepared to take care of kids. And so that's where I said, what can we do about this? How can we make an impact? And that was where we started a lot of our local work. So I would say, and answer your question, the greatest impact, pediatric education, the community ED, hands down, 100%, in my completely biased opinion. And I think we've seen that in, when I go out and talk to a community emergency department, I use the same phrase over and over. I don't want to take care of adults, and I don't have to. I'm a pediatric nurse, so I'm not going to take care of adults. You guys don't want to take care of kids, but you don't have that luxury because they're going to walk through the door in the ED. So what can we do to make it a little less scary, to make you feel like you're a little bit more prepared? And some of that is practicing hands-on and simulation. And, I could probably talk all day about that as well. But a lot of that is providing resources. We're not trying to make you a pediatric expert. That's not a realistic expectation. But making sure you have access to the resources you need to go back and reference the one time a year you get a pediatric DKA patient. And so that's really, I would say, where the greatest impact has come from outreach. I would say it's the number one most requested thing we get from a transport aspect, from the children's hospital aspect, is, can you come do pediatric education, whether it's with pre-hospital or with the emergency department?
Well, I can certainly understand that, because I started my career in EMS and then moved, when I became a nurse, moved to a a mixed ED, but mostly adults because we had no pediatric services. And so because of that, there was also often this affinity to take care of kids. It's like, they don't come here, we don't take care of them here, we transfer all of them out. And so my entire nursing career, I've been around people that are very hesitant to take care of children. And I think for me personally, I just didn't want to be that nurse. I didn't want to be the one running from the kid. I wanted to be the one running to the kid. And it's hard to change that mindset a lot. And I don't know why it's so difficult to do, but I appreciate people like you that are working to change that mindset and hopefully improve the care of children all over the world and specifically in the United States where a lot of this work is happening. And you mentioned simulation and you've talked about training and education and I've done a lot of work with different centers around the country that are centers of excellence for simulation and have these amazing sim labs and mock ECMO circuits and all this stuff, VR and whole surgical suites and things. And I think other centers say, oh, we don't have the money or we don't have the funding or we just that's way too much and we're too small to afford any of that. So there's this huge variance, not only in the technology of simulation, but in the ability to create certain environments that are based on that. And I know a lot of the work you're doing, you said, is at smaller hospitals than the one that you worked in the PICU at. But to the learner, what do you find is the most beneficial in simulation training? Is it the environment? Is it the technology? Is it the debrief and the post education that happens after? What are you finding people really seem to value the most out of simulation, regardless of the modality?
Yeah, Michael, that's a great question. And, I think I used to be very biased in this because, like I mentioned, when we first started doing simulation work, our model, both locally in Indiana and across impacts too, as starting, was taking our high technology simulator. So the simulator that does all the things, he, has a seizure and he's got lung sounds and pulses and you can do all the things to him. And that was our model, was taking that guy out, packing everything up, bringing it out and running simulations. And I think what was really pivotal to me was understanding the difference between a high fidelity simulation and a high technology simulation, because you can have high fidelity without having high technology. So, and I think that's a little nuanced. And I honestly had a hard time wrapping my head around that because I'm like, we need the guy that does all the things. It's going to be so much better for the learners. But what we've really found is that by going and running simulations in the environment that you're used to, so we'll say an ED room or trauma room in your ED, with the equipment and supplies that you normally have, with the team that you would normally work with, is going to right there increase your fidelity, because now I'm not in a sim lab, I'm not in a conference room. Not that those are bad things, those are alternative options, but by creating this realistic environment, we've already increased the fidelity because you feel like you're in a real situation, regardless of the fact that it's a plastic mannequin on the bed, right? And then pairing that with some lower technology approaches. So I can talk about SimBox. There's a lot of other options out there that really, instead of having to have pretty expensive software from one of the larger simulation companies or pretty expensive simulators and mannequins, really all you need is a laptop that you can pull up that would have a video of what your patient looks like and vital sign changes. So I think being able to provide that video, and I think seizure is a really great example because that's something, even as healthcare providers, nobody likes to watch anybody seize. It's very uncomfortable and it kind of heightens, our adrenaline a little bit. So to have a video of a seizing pediatric patient on the screen really helps heighten that fidelity of the scenario. In addition to things like if you are able to, have CT results, being able to see that, that's also going to heighten the fidelity of the simulation. And so I think when I look at it as the two really major parts where we're going to get learning is, one, trying to create that environment that is most realistic to what is available. And there can be a lot of, I'm talking about these are like best case scenarios, right? So you don't have any surge in patients in the ED. You actually have space to use. You actually have team members that can come join. And then the debriefing portion of it is that's where you get to discuss the case. That's where I think a lot of learning happens, not just in clinical care and that patient's trajectory, but also, okay, where are our resources? Why couldn't anyone find the atomizer to give intranasal midazolam? Oh, that's because we don't know where it is, or we don't have it, or it's not stocked down here. So pulling in those systems pieces of what can we do to more efficiently make things better for you to take care of kids, and would rather find it out during a simulation than when you're actually taking care of a patient. And so I think those two pieces together, really, that's what creates a really rich learning experience, but also something fulfilling for the staff to kind of take away and, maybe talk with others like, hey, did you guys know that if we want an atomizer, we have to call pharmacy and have them send it to us? And so we've seen a lot of other initiatives come out of simulations we've run. And I think just because this is, again, I could go through a whole podcast of simulation. This is definitely my area of passion. And so I would be remiss if I didn't mention all of that comes from a really safe, psychologically safe setting that the facilitators are setting for your learners. And I think as someone who comes in to outside facilities, who may or may not be trusted, who I may be seen as coming from the ivory tower, like they're coming here to judge us, setting an environment to where learners feel comfortable making mistakes, to behaving how they would normally behave, and making sure that they know this is a learning environment. We're not there to judge. Everybody is here to help and support is really, that's where through the sim and the debriefing, that's where you're going to get these really amazing learning and objectives coming out of the simulation. And even as coworkers, it can be stressful as coworkers facilitating for other coworkers and making sure that we've really set the stage for a safe educational experience for everybody, because I know a lot of us who may have been in this career field a little longer, simulation was used in a very different way. I know when I was in nursing school than how it might be used now, to where it's punitive or as a checkoff for my skills of passing certain things. And so we definitely don't want to bring that into these type of simulation settings. So that was my very long-winded answer of kind of the two pieces.
Yeah, I think it was a great answer, and I appreciate how you said us to bring all of us on this podcast into the older nursing school thought process. So thanks, Erin, for dating all of us.
You're
But
welcome.
what I actually wanted to follow up real quick before Holly has another question for you is you did mention Simbox, and I know you could talk about that a lot, but I have run into a lot of nurses, even in the last month or so, that don't know what Simbox is. So could you just please take a few minutes to explain Simbox a little bit more?
Yeah, I would be happy to. So Simbox is a free open access tool that you can access online, and I can share the website is emergencysimbox.com, and certainly we can share that after the podcast as well. That the Simbox kind of grew out of really the goal to democratize simulation. So for those of you who are listening, or those of you who have thought before, like, I'm not at a simulation center of excellence. We don't have a sim lab. This is not my background. I can't do it. The goal was to be able to provide some resources that are low technology, that create a high fidelity environment to be able to run simulations in your ED kind of whenever you want, so that you're not dependent on a team from the children's hospital or the transport team or going to conferences to experience these simulation events. Because what we've found is even in our outreach program here in Indiana, we can get to our site. We don't even get to every ED. And the sites we do get to, we're lucky to go once a year. And so having these more frequent simulation events in the ED where I could be there virtually as a facilitator or virtually as kind of a content matter expert in pediatrics, but the team is in person in their environment running through a scenario, has really, really been a positive experience. And again, getting more exposure to the high acuity, low frequency pediatric patients that some of these community EDs see. The majority of community EDs see less than 15 children per day, and most of those are not going to be critically ill children. So, we've tried to create a bank of cases, and we're always creating new ones. But it's a booklet paired with a video, and the booklet is meant to take you through if you're a completely novice simulationist up to if you are an expert, and really guides you through. In theory, you could just press play on the video and it would take you through a pre-briefing with your team, a 10-minute scenario, and then a 15-minute debriefing with your team. So it's really meant to support you wherever you are in your simulation journey, and to also provide more experiences for all of your colleagues and learners in the ED for pediatric care. So there's some how-to videos, and then our team is always, always excited to collaborate with people. So if there are cases that people are interested that are not on there, we're always working on new ones. And if people are interested in making cases or giving more feedback, we're always interested in that. There's a way to contact us through the website.
Honestly, we could spend a lot of time talking about this because I am fairly new to Simbox as well, but I have spent some time on it since I learned about it about a month and a half ago. And I cannot say enough how one of the things that you said earlier was just giving people more experiences with these very high acuity patients. And again, in most mixed EDs, you're not seeing that all the time. And what I have found with simulation is if you do it once a year, then you have the knowledge of that once a year. But if you do it multiple times throughout a year, or maybe once a month, or hey, even more frequently than that, if you have the ability to do that, and even if it's the same case every few months, like you pick up something new from that, you learn something new, or you reinforce something. So that way, when that actual patient comes in, whether it be a neonate, whether it be a kid with sepsis, whether it be, a kid seizing, any of those things, all of those things, like my inner nurse red flag just was like, whoa, oh, that's sick. I know that the best thing I can do is become more educated, more knowledgeable, and reinforce best practices, best things that I can do. So that way I can give the care that that patient definitely deserves. And again, anytime I've been scared of something in nursing, the best solution that I have found is I will never know less. I will only know more about this for the next time because it's coming. It's always coming. It's almost a guarantee in the ER. Like if something scares you, it's coming. It's just a question of when. Hopefully you've had some coffee that day because it's coming. And sometimes the waves of three, I feel like that's also true in the folklore of the emergency department. It's coming. It'll probably be three. So another topic that again we could spend a lot of time here is the Pediatric Readiness Project, which you talked about earlier. And you're very familiar with it. I've become familiar with it within the last year. I was collaborating with a local children's hospital, and helping them to work on their pediatric readiness. And I understand that it's a topic that some people may be like super familiar with, and some are like, what is this even? And overall, it really is, the whole goal is that whenever a kid shows up in any emergency department, that they would receive high quality care, and that nurses and physicians aren't running around trying to figure out where is the stuff to take care of this child who just showed up and who is very sick. So what are some common challenges? Maybe you can speak to the Pediatric Readiness Project. What are some common challenges to improving that? Because there are scores related to it, right? And then also, like, what are some recommendations for resources for people who are like, okay, I've heard of pediatric readiness, but that's all I know. So, Erin, help us.
Yes, I'm here to help. And Holly, you mentioned in the question, I think probably one of the biggest challenges is awareness of what it is and that it's out there. And we don't have to be running around scared. And, you said it, you think about it, and like that's what's coming through the ED today. Or I've done it where we've run sims and I get an email the next day and they're like, you will never believe what we got 2 hours after you left. So, I think getting the word out that The National Pediatric Readiness Project is a federally funded program that looks to improve pediatric readiness in emergency departments. So exactly that kids are receiving the highest quality of care no matter where they live. So if you think about it, in the United States, 85% of children are going to present to a non-children's hospital. And then we already talked about EDs see, the majority of EDs see less than 15 children per day. And kids are just going to present at the ED closest to their home, right? They're going to go, when there's an emergency, guardians and caregivers are taking them to the closest ED. So it's kind of, you don't know what you're going to get. And that's probably the reason why a lot of people like working in the ED is you never know what's going to walk through the doors. So when a kid, particularly a critically ill kid, which is where my background is, comes through the door, we want staff to feel ready and prepared to take care of them and give them the highest quality of care. So I think getting the word out that this is a thing, like you mentioned, there is a validated checklist that was a collaborative checklist that is revisited about every 5 years. This is work through the American Academy of Pediatrics, the Emergency Nurses Association, and the American College of Emergency Physicians, with probably some more collaborators coming on over this next year that have created kind of this validated weighted checklist that gives you a score, like you said at the end, and it goes through a lot of the things that we've been talking about today. So things like, do you have equipment, medication, and supplies to take care of children? Do you have policies and procedures? Safety? Do you have quality improvement initiatives that are geared specifically towards pediatrics? Education and competencies for both your nursing and provider physician staff? And then this concept of what the Pediatric Readiness Project calls is a PEC, which is a Pediatric Emergency Care Coordinator, which is essentially, the way I kind of boil it down, is this is your pediatric champion in the ED. And some people have been, I think, voluntold for this role. And some people are just passionate about pediatrics. But I think one of the biggest misconceptions in this role is that you need to be a pediatric expert to be the pediatric champion or the PEC in your ED. And that is just absolutely not true. You need to be the champion. You need to be the person at the table that says, what about pediatrics? When there are so many competing priorities that are happening, not just in the ED, but in our hospitals and our hospital systems, right? You have STEMI, stroke, trauma, all of these other things that are competing priorities. So the PEC is just that. You're the champion for pediatrics. So when you have hospital-wide competency skills day, say, hey, should we add in something about pediatric IOs and IV starts when we're already doing this? Or when you're pulling QI data for readmissions to the ED, say, hey, should we focus on our 0 to 18 population and look at that? So it's really just being a champion for it. So I think that's one piece, is to be able to improve your score and really make meaningful improvements without having someone owning that and saying, this is my role, I'm championing this, we're going to do this. I think you're going to have a really hard time making progress. So whether that's one person or a committee or, someone who works together with other people like trauma program managers to move that forward, I think that's the key first piece. I think with that, as you go through pediatric readiness score, it can be very overwhelming. There's a lot of questions. There's a lot of things that I know I did not understand as someone who just worked as a nurse with a clinical background. Like QI, for one, was something I did not have very much background in. And so it can be very overwhelming. There are, and like Holly, you asked about resources. So what are kind of some resources to get you started on your journey through pediatric readiness? I would say one is there is a website. Everything is digital these days, really making myself sound very old in this whole podcast. So I feel like that I'm not as old as I'm making myself sound, I promise. Not that there's anything wrong with that. But there is a website through that is Emergency Medical Services for Children Innovation and Improvement Center. I know that's a mouthful. But essentially, it has toolkits that go through these different domains of readiness. So if you go through the checklist and you notice, wow, we are missing a lot of equipment that we need to take care of kids, you could click on that domain and it would have toolkits on ways to kind of help obtain equipment. That one's a little more straightforward, right? So what about things like policy and procedures? As a clinical nurse, I had never in my life written a policy or procedure or would even know how to go about doing that. So if you notice, we don't have a policy for an under-immunized child who comes into the ED. You could go click on that toolkit and it would give you templates and kind of help guide you through that process for specific things. So I think that's one piece of it. So there's this whole website that again can be very overwhelming, but has a lot of great information. I think what we have really found in kind of starting with these small, achievable things. So getting that champion in place, who is going to champion this and help to move this work forward, even if it's just little baby steps at a time. And then I think the other piece of that is who are the other partners that you need to interact with, whether it's specifically in the ED or hospital or system-wide, right? So let's talk about the ED. Who's your contact in pharmacy? That may be a great collaborative partner. Radiology, leadership in the ED, which again, we could talk a whole podcast about how do you engage leadership and convince them that this is a worthwhile cause and this deserves support and help. And then if you have other inpatient units, if you have a pediatric inpatient unit, if you have a nursery, how do you kind of engage with staff and leaders? And then also our pre-hospital partners as well. How do we kind of engage with them to move pediatric readiness forward? And so when I think of the partners you need to interact with, I think that's very important to start to engage with these others within your hospital. But what we've found over the last couple of years of work of where we've really shifted, instead of having this academic medical center team, so me coming from Riley Hospital for Children and coming out and doing a sim and helping you through your PEDS readiness score, which I'm always happy to do. But how do we connect you with a mentor to really get started and not feel so completely overwhelmed? And one of the things, not reinventing the wheel. What resources are already out there? Don't create your own tracking tool when there's tracking tools that are already out there that you can utilize that are ready to go. I think another thing is you look at a PEDS readiness score, and again, I've used the term overwhelming so many times, but there's a lot on there. So pick one thing that you know you can achieve and work towards that. And we're not going to go from a score of 40 to 100 in a couple months. It's a process and we're going to maintain it. So it's kind of this lifelong journey through the ED of maintaining pediatric readiness. So again, there's a lot of resources out there. We have also worked on our Impacts website to create kind of a milestone guide to go through to very much what I've described of, instead of trying to tackle everything, here's kind of a more methodical way to go through. First, just understand what is the role of a PEC and what is that? And so like what we talked about here, you don't have to be a pediatric expert. How do you find resources? How do you implement a QI plan? How do you do some of these things that, quite frankly, are a lot of out of our scope and out of our previous experience that we've had as clinical nurses? How do you engage and onboard a physician partner to really help kind of a global change in the ED to make sure that providers are on board as well? So even really just starting there. And so we've tried to kind of create a checklist so that it's very easy to go down and that's linked to the resources. A lot of them are on that EIIC website that I had shared earlier. There's, again, a lot of great resources out there that people have already created. I think it's a matter of just getting it out to people to use and knowing that they're there. So again, that we're not doing double work, because a lot of people, especially in the beginning, starting in this role of PEC, are probably doing it voluntarily. They may not be getting paid for their time. So how do we make this really efficient and effective for them to do it easily, to start making a lasting change, to then hopefully get more people on board to say, hey, this is important and look what we've been able to do, and let's make sure we support this both financially and as an institution.
Anybody that's interested in improving pediatric care, if they didn't get 500 nuggets out of that last little bit, they're missing out. They need to stop, rewind, and go back. But that was awesome, Erin. Thank you for sharing that. A lot of great points there and very well spoken, very well put together. So we appreciate that. And I know we're running short on time already, so I wanted to just jump into the next question. And I love this question, and I love the fact that I get to ask it all the time. Is asking you about somebody that's impacted you personally, whether it's a person or maybe even a moment in your career that's made an impact on you. Because even talking to you, and I know people can't see this podcast, but just in our conversation, you're very energetic, you're very passionate about emergency care and the work that you do. And so where did all this come from? And is there any certain person or a moment in time when you're like, this really changed who I am as a person?
Definitely several throughout my career, and I think of a lot of patients, but I think of the work that I'm doing now. And when I started out as a nurse working in PICU and critical care, never ever did I imagine this is where I would be working, doing pediatric readiness and teaching and education and simulation. And I'm very glad the path that brought me here. And I would definitely attribute the bulk of that to working transport. And I think generally just going out in the community and meeting other caregivers and providers and building relationships has been really impactful. I have a specific transport that comes to mind of a very, very sick kid who we were called to transport, who was a flu patient, and the ED did a phenomenal job. I mean, they just were amazing. And I mean, this kid basically went from coming in to walking and talking to, by the time I transported her to Riley, which was probably within an 8 to 10 hour period, was on ECMO. So she was about as sick as you can get in the peds world. And so, just seeing the teamwork, the way they came together, and this was a site that I knew and had worked with before, but I certainly had not prepared them for this sort of scenario. We had never kind of gone through this. And so seeing them utilize their resources, calling and activating transport very early in the process, knowing that this was a really sick kid, recognizing that, was just incredible to see. And so that has always stuck with me, to the point where, I was having a conversation with her mother saying, I don't know if she's going to survive transport. We will call you as soon as we get there. And then getting to go see her the next day. And the mom immediately recognized me in street clothes. I said, you probably don't know who I am. And she said, oh, I know who you are. And that patient had a absolutely amazing outcome. She had no neurological deficits. I mean, she is healthy and thriving and amazing. And the only reason she is because of the care she received in that ED, that they were able to stabilize her so quickly and recognize so quickly that she needed to be gone. And she did not come in like straightforward, like, oh, this kid's going to end up on ECMO. She didn't present that way. So getting to experience that firsthand as also being a part of her care team and a provider of her care and working with this team, I was like, okay, this is working. This is helping. And if it only helped this one patient, then fine. It's been worth it. My career's been worth it. And I hope that we help more. And I know that we are, but that's definitely, I think, kind of solidified me into, you're on the right path and you're doing the right thing. And somehow you got to where you are and you're doing it.
It's an amazing story. And I love when you feel like, if you are the mom in that situation, the patient, like how grateful they are for the care that they received and how they feel like, man, my life is forever impacted by the care. But it's so cool that you're on the flip side of that and you're like, my life was so impacted by the care that this patient received, and that I got to play a part in that, and really like being able to lay the groundwork and say, like, you're planting a lot of seed and you're like, I really hope some of this takes root. And then to watch it unfold in the care of a patient, and where you see it directly is impacting this child and their family, the people who love them, and to see that just come full circle and have such a positive and successful outcome. And I do realize it's harder to sometimes feel oh gosh, I'm so glad we did this, when the outcome is not as successful. But when we keep that level of care high, no matter the outcome, we know that we've done the right thing. And if nothing else, it gives us peace when we lay our head down at night, to know that like we did the best that we could do in that time. And that again, I love to hear stories like that because it's such a great reminder that the profession that we're in, the career that we've chosen to be a part of, like it is going to impact you. And hopefully the impact moves you forward. Like you said, there's just these patients that stick with you. And if it was just for that one, then you feel like, yeah, I was in the right place at the right time for that one. So, I love hearing those stories. I'm so glad Michael gets to ask the question because then I can just like sit here and be like, tell me the tale. I'm ready. I love stories. So, well, I get the chance to ask you a few rapid fire questions, and they're really just so we can get to know you a little bit better as a person.
Okay.
I feel like I feel like I might know the answer to this one, but you could shock me. So, what would you be doing if you were not in your current role, career, etc.?
Okay, I know I mentioned at the beginning I thought I would be a teacher or a nurse, but I think now where I'm at in my life, I would probably be like a wedding planner or some kind of like event organizer. I would love to do something like that.
I would be your second. Like,
Right.
I don't want to deal with the contractual agreements and
Right.
like the face to face. I don't want to deal with like all the mother-in-laws. You have to do all that. But I will be the one who you're like, I need you to go do all the cake testing. And I'll be like,
Yes.
I am in it. Send me.
Okay.
I
Okay.
will.
What flowers do we need?
Yes, I will go
Okay. Great.
smell and watch the floors put together all the combinations and be like, this one's the best.
Yeah.
So I'd be a great second. But that is awesome. Like I said, I kind of expected the teacher, but
Huh?
wait up, change it up there. All right, I have some categories regarding, again, favorites. All right, so we'll just jump right in. Your favorite book, or it can be a quote that kind of really inspires you.
Oh, favorite. Okay. I do love to read, so I don't know that I could narrow it down to one favorite book. I do have to just give a caveat. The quote that is coming to mind is because I have a 5-year-old right now who is very into Spider-Man. So we have been reading a lot of Spider-Man. And I was talking with my husband earlier today, and the quote from Spider-Man of like, with great power comes great responsibility. But I think that applies to anything in healthcare and this work that we're all doing, that, with this knowledge and background that we all possess, there is a great amount of responsibility that comes with that. And I try to always remember that as like a healthcare provider. So, yes. So my favorite quote is from Spider-Man currently.
I mean, honestly, when my kid was really into like Bluey, and
Mhm.
she still is, which is fantastic because I will
You
definitely watch that.
simply-
I find myself, I'm like, I am so inspired as a parent right now.
Yes.
So, yeah, I'm definitely not knocking it at all. If anything, I'm with you. And I also love to read, so I understand the conundrum that comes with trying to figure out a favorite book. A lot of times I just tell people, I'm like, look, I can't tell you a favorite, but I can tell you like in my last 3 or 4 reads, like which one I would recommend to you.
Yes.
And then I have to look at a list because honestly, they all I'm like, what was that again? So, but all right, favorite movie, TV show, or a binge-worthy series because we love those.
Okay. Favorite movie is definitely Father of the Bride. Love that. And even love the sequel. Like, that's one of the ones where, like, the sequel is as good as the first one. And I will go to my grave with that. TV show. My sister and I have we love Gilmore Girls. We can watch it over and over again. That's like my comfort. Everybody has like a comfort TV show. That's definitely my comfort show. And then binge worthy. My husband and I just got done binging the seasons 1 and 2 of Severance, which was really intense but really good if you haven't watched it yet.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I have the series I'm definitely putting on the list. I have a few. My list, every time we ask this question, it grows a little bit. The movie part, you could not have said more truth in your movie. Yes. I mean, Franck, what a character. I could watch that all day long. So 100% supportive of both one and
The
two.
classic combination, Steve Martin and Martin Short. Like, you just can't.
Yes. Yes. Like they should have come out with the only murders in the building
Uh-huh.
or whatever it is. They should have done that years ago.
Oh, for sure.
Like, why didn't people go, this was a great duo and just make shows with them over and over again? Like,
Yeah.
anyway, we could have solved that problem. All right. Favorite song or a musical artist that can just kind of move you?
So I think, again, I will relate this to my kids because we spend a lot of the time in the car for pickup and drop off going to school. And so our morning song tradition on our way to school is We Will Rock You by Queen to like get us pumped for the day. So that's kind of like my go-to. I don't know if it like moves me, but it definitely gets me like going for the day a little bit, which I have found is helpful.
Yes, yes. If there could be an anthem for like, hey, we gotta get pumped up, that would definitely be on like my top 10. Like that song will get you ready. What for? Who knows?
I don't know, but you'll be ready.
But you'll be ready. Yes, agreed. Okay. And this question I love to hear because again, as nurses, as healthcare individuals, I don't feel we do a fantastic job on self-care. So I love asking this because I feel like it gives maybe somebody who isn't quite in that vein yet, gives them some ideas. So do you have like a self-care go-to or something that helps you reset?
I 100% agree with you. And I think it is challenging to do self-care because it feels just that it's selfish, but we need to do it. And I think I'm doing a better job of this as I'm learning and growing. I would say probably my go-to, I mentioned I love to read, so I think like a good book and a nice bubble bath, which is an easy thing to do at home. I have two very small children, so that's an easy thing I can do after bedtime that like just helps me zone out a little bit and relax. And so I love, some good smelling candles, some good bubble bath. That's definitely been kind of my go-to throughout my life, but I've been trying to work to like prioritize that more, especially when I'm overwhelmed or coming off like a super long shift and like girl just needs a minute. And so that's usually my go-to. That's an easy way to do self-care. All about ease as well, because if you have to plan the self-care, then it doesn't turn out to be
Yes.
self-care.
Yes. I feel like there are people who tell me, oh, I go get a massage
Mhm.
once or twice a year. And I'm like, I feel like your job slash role slash life
Yeah.
probably needs more than like 2 times a year of taking care of yourself. It should be, if not weekly or monthly, I feel like there should be really a pace to it. And sometimes it is just like that ease, whether that be getting a good book that you can kind of just really absorb yourself in, or whether that be, taking that run or going to work out or going to sit in the quiet of your backyard or going for a walk or whatever that might be, where you just feel like I had a chance to breathe. I had a chance to sit with my thoughts and kind of work through some of the stress that you just hold on to. And that when you come back, you're like, okay, it doesn't mean that the problems are solved. It doesn't mean that everything's worked out. It doesn't mean that the stress has gone away. It just means that your brain's had time to like work through it. And surprisingly enough, I tell people, I'm like, look, when you take care of yourself, you unlock a level of creativity and curiosity that will oftentimes help you in your life, right? So
Yep.
like you're helping yourself in multiple ways. So again,
Couldn't
I love
agree more.
love to hear that you're prioritizing that. Yes, candle, bubble bath, book. Sounds like a good time. All right. So if our audience would like to reach out to you, because again, you dropped so, like Michael said, there was like 500 things from this podcast that we could already take and want to ask you questions about and follow up with. So is there a way that people can reach out to you and get in contact with you?
Yes, and please reach out if you have questions, if you're interested, or even just learning more. So please don't hesitate to reach out. Email is usually the best way actually to get a hold of me, which is white20@iu.edu. And I'm sure you guys can share that. We also, I think I shared the Simbox website, which is emergencysimbox.com. There's a way to contact our team, which essentially goes to me. So you can reach out that way if you had some specific questions or wanted to learn more about Simbox. And then we also have our impacts website, which there's a way to contact, which also goes to me at impactscollaborative.com. But there's a lot of information on there, more about what we talked about today, especially about some of those resources and milestones and ways to get started in pediatric readiness as well.
Amazing. Well, I will post those with the blog for this episode.
Great. Thank you
Well,
guys so much for having me. This was really fun.
yeah, we appreciate getting to visit with you, Erin. And, like I said at the beginning, I got to meet you recently and I've been really excited to just get to sit down more. The whole time you've been talking, I have all these ideas in my mind of should we talk about this? Should we do a webinar on that? Should we do an in-person course on, there's so much around it that I think people are really looking for guidance and leadership on how to move through the waters of pediatric readiness. And I think you gave some really great pointers today. So thank you for sharing your knowledge with everybody, and it's been really great chatting with you today.
Yeah, same. And keep the ideas coming. Let's do it. I'm down.
Well, I want to take this time to thank Erin for joining us for this episode of BCN and Friends. Thank you, Erin, for the clarity you bring to complex healthcare challenges and for caring for your community through empowerment and education. We truly appreciate you and all that you are doing. And to all of our listeners, we hope you'll stay tuned as we continue with BCN and Friends and bring you new, meaningful content and perspectives. If you have a suggestion for an episode, please email us at bcn@bcn.org. I'm Holly Briggs, here with Michael Dexter, and on behalf of the entire BCN team, we thank and celebrate you for all that you're doing as professional nurses across the emergency spectrum. Until next time, we are out.